Welcome To Know the Love of Christ.
Welcome back to Know the Love of Christ. If you were with us during the last episode, you know that we were in Mark chapter 2, verses 1 through 17. We discussed Jesus healing the paralytic and the faith of the paralytic and his friends, and we also discussed him calling Matthew or Levi and eating at his home and how that stirred up the Pharisees. If you are ready, go ahead and turn to Mark 2, verses 18 through chapter 3, verse 6. If you want, go ahead and pause right here and read that passage, and then we'll dive in.
So we mentioned in the last episode how the people around reasoning in their hearts and observing, they questioned his disciples. Here they're going to question him directly. And this is coming off the heels of healings and teachings. But now they're going to start questioning practices, particularly Sabbath practices or things that have been bound that aren't in the law. So verses 18 through 22 is like, and then again in 23 through 28, the question is why? It's like children, why this, why that? But in verse 28, Jesus gives the answer why. So let's talk about 18 through 22. I did notice, I don't know if y'all noticed that I kind of wondered who they were, It said the disciples of John and of the Pharisees. So this could have been an honest question, or it could have been a trap. It could have gone either way, depending who asked.
Like you said, they didn't ask Jesus, or last time, but this time they asked Jesus, and they asked him about his disciples. So again, we have that, like, I'm not going to directly confront who it is, but also at that time, I didn't really think about it. And I mean, I would say this is probably true for like school teachers these days. Back then, the teacher was responsible for the actions of the follower. So if your students were not behaving correctly, that was on you because you're in control. I didn't know that.
That seems logical.
Yeah, it does. It's like children, but it's like malicious, because children typically don't have a malicious reason. I mean, every now and then one of my kids thinks they're being smart, and they'll be like, Mommy, what did you just say? Or what did you just do? And it's like they want to trip me up, like, oh, you did something I can't do, which it's okay for mommy to do sometimes. Like, sometimes I'm allowed to do things you're not allowed to do. But they don't get that because everything is very linear in their minds. Like, it's okay for mommy to stay up past a certain time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you and daddy were up late last night? What? Scandalous. But, they'll ask questions like that. But but Jesus knew their hearts,
Mm-hmm.
Jesus knew their heart at every turn, and we don't. But just the gall here, I'm like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine? Which, like we talked about before, I don't think it didn't register who he was. It obviously didn't.
Yeah, I agree with you, Stephanie. I don't think it registered, but I do think at this point, the Pharisees realize Jesus has some real authority. Like, they realize there is something about this man. Now, they don't realize that he's the Messiah, but whatever they realize, I think it's kind of like that. I think it was Simon the sorcerer in Acts, where he's like trying to pay for the power. Like, how do I get power like this? That's how I feel about the Pharisees at this point. It's like this man has some authority that we've clearly never seen. We want that authority, but because we can't obtain that authority, the next best thing is just to try and knock him off, right?
Yeah.
Like, we can't have your authority, if we can't have it, nobody gets it, and so it's like at this point, it's like we just need to get rid of him because people are following him, and before he came, we had all the authority, and now all of our authority is being ignored, and nobody's paying us any attention. It's like, oh, pay me some attention, but they're not getting that anymore. So, and I think too, Stephanie, about what you said, because here, when they go into when we look at verses 18 through 22, this clearly seems to be another day, because previously he was reclining at the table with Levi. Now they're doing something else, and they're questioning about fasting. And I also think it's interesting about the Pharisees is just like, all right, so we're sick of Jesus, we're tired of him, we got to find a way to knock him off. And so I believe part of this is let's follow him around so we can try and catch him up some way. But I also can't help but feel or think that we're also very intrigued with him. Like, why does he talk the way that he does? Why does he handle situations the way that he does? So, yeah, we want to knock him off, but we're also kind of curious about him, too.
Yeah. I like how, he calls his true followers and says, follow me, yet he has others following him too, kind of like, what's this all about? And if we're going to be Christ-like, we follow him. So are there others going, what's Dee doing? Why is she doing this for her Jesus? And why is she doing that? And interesting.
Yeah. And historically speaking, I didn't know this, but mourning and fasting, because I wondered why, I always wondered that, like where he says they don't fast because the bridegroom is with them. Now is not the time to fast. When I leave is the time to fast. And so it said that mourning and fasting and heavy acts of labor, were not permitted during wedding feasts, which was usually about 7 days, which this is obviously longer than 7 days, but I didn't know that. I thought that was very interesting. And then I wondered, further about just the illustrations he uses. They don't make sense to us, but it would have made a ton of sense to them because these were items that they used. And so for the wineskins there, it said that when you put wine into a wineskin for the first time, it stretched the wineskin to capacity when it fermented. And so for you to put new wine into an old wineskin, it has to ferment, and it would stretch something that's already been stretched to the point it's like filling a water balloon, that's already been filled and then let out. You try to put more in, it's going to pop. And so it's useless at that point because it's broken. But also, I guess we can apply to this, but we buy all our clothes pretty much. If you've ever patched anything, if you've got a piece, if you sew something and you haven't washed the fabric, when you sew it, it shrinks. And then your seams get all messed up and the garment is kind of wonky, for lack of a better word. And so for this, when you put a new piece of unshrunk fabric on an old piece that has been shrunk, that new piece is going to shrink and kind of mangle what you've got. I just love, me and my word pictures. I just thought those were interesting. I've always, thought about it when I've been reading those passages and just never taken the time to look at it.
I actually had in my notes, I have no idea what this means.
Well, now
I knew it
Hmm.
had some significance, but I was like,
I've always wondered. He had a reason for putting it there.
Nice.
That's really interesting. I was also thinking too, well, I don't want to jump ahead or anything. It's still in the text, but like, did y'all think about anything as far as the fasting goes? Like Jesus tells them, he's like, you wouldn't fast when you're with the bridegroom. You fast when the bridegroom is gone, when they are no longer with you. What did y'all think about that? Like, we don't have to keep the Sabbath holy, right? Like, because we know that we're able to work and do different things and like that. But I was just thinking, like, in this passage, Jesus is talking about himself. He's the bridegroom, obviously. And so once he leaves, then the disciples will fast. And I just kind of thought to myself, I was like, I've never been one to fast, but I was talking to some other people, and they were telling me about how they would fast from time to time, and obviously they wouldn't take this verse and say you have to fast. It was just a choice of their own. I was just thinking, if we fast, we could devote ourselves to other things, So like, if we decide that, like, okay, from sun up till about, I don't know, 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon or evening, whichever one you want to call that, I'm gonna fast and I'm gonna devote myself to prayer, or I'm gonna devote myself to really digging deep into like maybe not a whole chapter of the Bible, but maybe like a block of passage. Jesus says, like, so when you do fast, and I believe it's in Matthew somewhere, and I think when he I think he's getting ready to teach them the prayer.
About prayer,
think.
yeah.
Yeah. And so Jesus says, so when you do fast. So it seemed like to me like there are times where maybe Jesus kind of expects us to do it. Like you don't have to do it, but it would be a good thing for you to practice.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, that's Matthew 6:16,
Thanks.
where he says, when you fast, don't be like the hypocrites with sad faces, for they disfigure their faces that
Yeah.
they may be seen by men.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as purposeful fasting, I've done like, sun up to sundown before. I've not done that one a lot. But it's very interesting because those first few hunger pangs, eventually your body gets used to it and it stops like prompting you. But I will say when those would happen, like, I don't know if I read it somewhere, but I was like, I'm going to pray when they hit. Like, it's going to be a prayer trigger for me. And so I'd have a thing, I want to say I've done it 3 or 4 times over the years. I know there are people that are very serious about it, and if they listen to this, they're going to be like, you are ridiculous. But, I didn't have anybody to instruct me. I just wanted to know what it was like, because it does say when you fast. And I really do believe that here it's a cultural thing, like a Hebrew culture thing. Like, we aren't ever commanded, like, you must fast. But Jesus does say, but he's talking to his apostles there when you fast.
Yeah.
I do really think it's a cultural thing, but I probably should look that up. But I don't know. To them, it was a way of life, and it was something they did for that purpose. Like, I'm going to focus on God, and I'm going to deny my body these things. But you never deny your body for destructive purposes. Mm-hmm. But I will say, like, it's almost like a point of mental clarity. Yeah. Like, you get to this point where, like, you're firing on all pistons, so to speak, and food isn't a distraction. Mm-hmm. Which I think is really, it's very interesting how God made our bodies to function.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
all that to say, yes, I've done it before in multiple ways, some on purpose, some not.
Well, I think I've done like the typical mom fasting where like you get up in the morning and you're so busy worried about the children. It's like, man, I haven't even had time to pop a chip in my mouth, and it's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I might just now be having my well, no, not my first cup of coffee. That's a lie. Probably my second or third cup of coffee, But I was just thinking, like, there is something to be said about the fasting, and Stephanie, I wholeheartedly agree with you, and the people listening. We're not saying that the Bible commands you to fast. I'm just saying, like, it wouldn't be a bad thing
to benefits.
Practice. Yeah, there are benefits to it, and I just wanted y'all thoughts on it, because I know that I fasted, if I'm honest with myself, I've probably fasted once, purposely. And at that particular time, like, I wasn't going through anything catastrophic or anything like that. I had just been studying, and I thought, it might be a good idea for me to fast and kind of maybe focus on one thing. But I think that particular time when I had decided to do it, I decided to focus on prayer. And of course, I didn't think about, like, every time a hunger pain hits, to pray. But in a less, in a different way, I would, like, the hunger pain would hit, and I'd be like, oh, Lord, please help me to get through this. That is a prayer, but it's more of like, I am starving and I'm really trying to do this,
What I found, culturally speaking, the law required fasting only on the Day of Atonement, but Jewish tradition added many other fasts, and Pharisees were often said to fast twice a week.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, and during, sometimes without water. Even.
Oh, my. Really?
And like in the dry season, that's what it says. Wow. And it was often joined with prayer and penitence. So this says that it would have been unusual for disciples to have avoided it altogether. And so, like, since this is a religious teacher, that would have been very unusual for them.
All right, so moving on, verses 23 through 28 is another why question that they pose to Jesus. They're just looking to get him. They're just looking to trap him with something. I just love how Jesus answers in verse 27. The Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. Therefore, the Son of Man is also Lord of the Sabbath. So You're not going to catch me. This is, I created this for.
Yeah, they were more concerned with the letter of the law than they were the principle behind it.
Yeah.
And the whole purpose behind the Sabbath was for rest and for like the regeneration of your spirit, but your body, because God rested on the seventh day. And so they're taking this principle and literally casting it aside because, thinking in today's terms, do Jewish people today not open a bag of chips?
Right.
Do they have to open the fridge, open everything if they're going to follow this letter of the law? Because that's what I think of when I think of them plucking the heads of grain, like rolling it between their hands and eating it. Like,
yeah. But if you look at the passage too, that's what he says in verse 25 when they're questioning like why, and Jesus mentions David and how, when David was on the run and he was hungry and the people that he had with him, he went into the house of God, only where the priests were allowed to be, and he took the showbread and he ate it. Like, David wasn't finna, just because I'm on the run, like, I'm not gonna starve myself or my men. Like, I have a right to eat, and I think that just goes to show, like, number one, D, what you said about in verse 28, so the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. Like, that's Jesus showing his authority again, establishing that authority again. But also, like, I almost feel like it's like, which I appreciate everything Jesus does, but he just has such a subtle and classy way of slapping people in the face.
Oh, yeah,
like,
for sure. That's what I was thinking too.
Like, he can slap you in the face and make you feel so foolish without even, lifting a finger and without even doing it in a rude manner. It's just like, look, yeah, it's the Sabbath, but my apostles are hungry. I'm not going to tell them that they can't pick the grain and rub it through their hand. It's not like they're harvesting it. But then, we read other passages too where he will get onto them and say, on the Sabbath, if your donkey runs off, are you going to let the donkey just run off, or are you going to go get it? Like, like, let's be realistic. And I think that's where these Pharisees have gotten themselves in so much trouble, because they were trying to hold up the law, but they wanted to be so overly righteous and wanted to be seen that they started making up certain things that, number one, God never said, and second of all, like, let's be honest, you can't even hold these things up yourself. Like, you telling me on the Sabbath day, like, if you're hungry, you're not gonna cut yourself a piece of lamb quarter? Like, you're not gonna have a lamb chop? Like, you're not? Like, it's like...
Right, and they could have been disciplined here for what they did. I didn't think about that, but Jesus pulls a biblical precedent here out of the Old Testament from 1 Samuel 21, and he protects his disciples with it, which I hadn't thought about. Like, they were accusing them, but they could have disciplined them for it. And I think it said that only for people that completely rejected the Sabbath was capital punishment used.
Oh my.
Yeah, but other disciplinary actions could be used, but that was only if they completely rejected it. So this would have been a lesser discipline. But even so, he protected them, and it doesn't say that he was doing it. So he wasn't saving his own skin here.
I like how they throw this law in his face, but Jesus turns the accusation right back around at them and is like, have you never read? In other words, go to Scripture. You take my
and
law.
And they would have been the most versed.
Right, they should have been. Yeah, for being the law enforcers. So go to Scripture, not tradition, not, oh, we've always done it this way, so we need to continue doing it this way. Go to Scripture.
Yep.
That's a good point.
All right, moving on. Do y'all have anything else? Okay. So chapter 3, 1 through 6 is another synagogue incident. He's going in, not necessarily to heal this man with the withered hand, but probably to go teach and preach like he had been doing. But because of their recent questioning of his practices or his disciples' practices of Sabbath issues, he is going to basically put them to the test, and put them in their place. So they watched him closely in verse 2. Look at that. They watched him closely whether he would heal on the Sabbath so that they might accuse him. Ooh. Can you just feel the tension?
You can, but again, like that's what I was saying earlier. Like they are intrigued by Jesus. Like it's like we're following him around because we want to catch him up. Like we want to catch him because we're frustrated. I think it's also like that. Can he heal him? Like we've seen him do other things. Like is this some type of magic trick? Like what is this? Like is he gonna do it? And then it's like we want to know if he can do it. But then if he does do it, it's like aha, we're gonna get you again. You know what I mean? Like we have another reason to accuse you of something.
But he's going in on the Sabbath into the synagogue. Is he going to do a good work? You know, they're too busy watching and not serving or loving or worshiping.
I think about several different passages with this, like 1 Corinthians 13, where it talks about what love is.
Mm-hmm.
And love does not rejoice at wrongdoing. And it doesn't,
Is not puffed up.
It's not puffed. I'm just thinking, like, literally, you could not put the Pharisees in here. People, you go places like retreats, you hear lessons, they're like, oh, can you put your name in there?
Yeah.
Oh, Pharisees, no.
No,
sorry, you can't put your name in there. But I was also thinking about Matthew 5, where Jesus basically, he talks about the law in 17 through 20. And he says, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot, will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Which I'm thinking, like, Pharisees, like, up to about almost the end of that right there, they're probably like, yeah, that's right. If they were to hear this, but then, like, there at the end, it's like, oh.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, right. Oh, apparently, yeah, no.
Yeah, but
No, which that wasn't directed to them, obviously.
I like how Jesus, he turns a question on them. Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill it? You can almost hear him saying, come on, let's go. I want to hear what you got to say. And he uses this man to teach, to glorify God, to destruct their traditions and their motives, and to bless this man all at one time.
I think it's interesting in verse 4 where he says these things and it says, but they were silent. I love that right there. Jesus has, you talked about like slapping people in the face.
Yeah.
Was that you, Brittany?
Yeah.
Someone said that. Like that silence speaks volumes right there.
Mm-hmm.
And then moving on to verse 5 where it talks about how he was grieved. He was angered. And he was grieved at their hardness of heart. I don't know, like to me that paints such a word picture. But I looked up that word for hardness, porosis, and it's a covering with a callus, or obtuseness, or blindness. And I just thought about it, and it made me think about the older brother in Luke 15, when the younger brother comes home in the prodigal son, the parable of the prodigal son, and how he should have been rejoicing. Like these Pharisees should have been rejoicing at just this wonderful work that Jesus had just done. And this man who wouldn't have had the use, like that would have affected everything about his life. It's not just like a physical deformity, like any kind of work, like he would have a hard time getting a job with anybody as a hired laborer, as anything. And this would change his life in such a drastic way, and it would help their community as well to have another able-bodied man. And they are grieved over it in a very malicious way.
Yeah.
But just like the older brother, like he should have rejoiced when the prodigal son came home, but he was angry because like I've kept the law, I've done everything, I'm righteous, I've been here, and you're killing the fatted calf for him and throwing a party. And here they are over here, And it's like, we're doing everything right. And he comes in and he does this. And they're just so angry about it. They can't rejoice for their brother. I mean, this would have been a brother to them in this synagogue. And they can't even do that. And it just, I don't know, that just amazes me that, I mean, that they were that hardened. Like before, when we saw the paralytic being healed, it said all were amazed and they all glorified God. And here they are, you know, I don't know if I can say distraught, but I mean, they are very much bothered by this, as we see, because they go out in verse 6 and plot to destroy him immediately. Immediately.
Yeah.
And the thing about that's crazy to me is that the Herodians here would have been their kind of like their enemies. Let me read you what I think this is an ESV Study Bible, what it says about the Rhodians. A loosely organized group that sought to advance the political and economic influence of the Herodian family. And they were, let's see, the Pharisees and the Rhodians were adversaries in regard to many political and religious issues, because the Rhodians, like the Pharisees, very much like the Zealots, felt that when the Messiah came, like God should have all the power. And when the Messiah comes, he's going to take care of that. And the Herodians didn't want that, but they were Jews. They thought, which Herod was a Jew, they wanted Herod and his family to rule. And so they were often butting heads. And they immediately went out and sought their enemy to destroy this common enemy. You know, we see that thread through a lot of things in life,
Sure,
like two evil people or two people are united by a common enemy. I keep trying to call it enemy. But this is where we see it officially begin right here in verse 6. This is the start of the plot right here. And they were that upset over a healing on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
That upset by something that glorified God.
By someone who was busy worshiping God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not just to have Jesus arrested, but to destroy him. I mean, that's pretty extreme. And of course, they go through extreme measures, as we later learn.
So there were two, I don't know if you call it schools, but there were two groups even within the Pharisees, the Shamites and the Hillelites, which were following two different people, two different schools of thought. And I think I'm saying it right, Shamites, they were so strict on the law that they felt that you could not even pray for a sick person on the Sabbath.
Oh my.
Yeah, you couldn't even pray for the healing. At least that is what I found in research on biblical background. And I was like, dude, I mean, can you get any harder?
Right.
Like, you can't, your mom's sick. Sorry. No praying about that on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
We love you so much, we hate you.
Yeah. Like, sorry, Mom, I know you're dying today, but it's the Sabbath.
Right. Wow.
It's Corbin.
Right. Right.
Oh, goodness.
It's the Lord's will. You'll just have to go.
Right.
I can't pray for you.
Right. Yeah. Whew. Awful. All right. Well, that brings us to where we find the love of Christ in these passages.
When I was trying to figure out where I see the love of Christ, I was kind of like, man, these are all like kind of like not instructions, but just information, and it's good information. But I was thinking, you know, where do I see the love of Christ? But as I thought about it, I really do see it like I said, I love how Jesus answers them in such a classy way, but he also shuts them down. It's like answer a fool according to their folly.
Right.
And so I really did appreciate the way God or Jesus always handled himself and the way he saw fit to answer them, you know? And I think that's why I see the love of Christ, because it's like, you know, Jesus didn't have to give them the time of day, but he chose to anyway, because, you know, just as much as the Pharisees were wrong, he still came to save them too. And it's like, look, I'm going to rebuke you accordingly, but I'm going to do it in a manner where, you know, like, I don't mean any harm, but that's how you take it. But also to know that I still love you too. And I just appreciate, I don't know, I just appreciate how he always handled the Pharisees. And for me, it was more so about understanding how I should be better about answering people who I feel come with silly or ridiculous questions. What would Jesus do? But in this particular case, what would Jesus say, or how would Jesus answer it, you know? And so that's where I see the love of Christ, learning how to answer people accordingly. That's what I saw, and that's where I saw the the love of Christ, and at this particular moment, it's more of how it pertained to me personally.
Yeah, I see it probably in verses 1 through 6 of chapter 3, there at the end of what we were studying. And I think about that man with the withered hand. And Jesus says to him, "Come here." And then he uses it as kind of a teachable moment with the Pharisees. But I just sit there and I wonder, man, what was going on in this guy's mind?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Is he going to do it? Is he not going to do it? What's about to happen? But I think about how Jesus does that with me. He takes my healing and he uses it as a teachable moment to those around me who might look at the circumstance and say, that's not appropriate. God shouldn't heal you of that brokenness. You don't deserve that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the right time, etc., etc. I mean, I remember I was talking to Rick the other day when we lost our first baby. He ran into someone in the grocery store and they said, God just didn't think you'd make good parents. He didn't think you were ready yet.
What?
Which I know they meant
Wow.
well. I do. I really do.
That's a moment
But in
where
that,
I'm
I
like,
was so glad I was at home resting because I would have lost it. Stephanie would have lost it.
yeah, that's one
but
of
I
those
was
moments where
telling
you're
Rick,
like, how would Jesus
people
answer this?
think they know what they're talking about, and they don't. And I think about when everything happened years ago, I'm like, I told Rick, I think it was yesterday or the day before, I'm surprised someone didn't say, well, maybe God just didn't think Stephanie would make a good preacher's wife, and that's why all that happened. I was like, can you imagine if someone had said that, how I would have reacted? People, as humans, we like to read into situations. We like to think we know what's going on. And a lot of things we just don't, and we won't, and that's okay. But when I think about this circumstance, I don't ever want to read into anything for sure. I don't want to eisegete. I want to pull from the text. But I just wonder about him and the feelings he would have had, and then how they would have treated him afterward. Oh, well, Jesus healed you on the Sabbath and he shouldn't have done that.
Mm-hmm.
And they were grudgingly holding it, that situation. I don't know about against him, but against Jesus. And I mean, I don't know if they held it against him, but yeah, sorry, I totally went off topic there. But that is where I see the love of Christ, that Jesus does that with my own circumstance, even if people who would wrongly see it that way, I can know that Christ does that for me on a continual basis.
I also see it in the healing of the man. Here's this man worshiping on the Sabbath, doing what he's supposed to be doing, and along comes Jesus and uses him to call out, the traditions, and he got the blessing from it. Jesus could have done anything at that point, but he also blessed this man in the process.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I saw the love of Christ. All right, thanks again for joining us today. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact us. We would love to study with you or connect you to someone local. As always, we hope you will seek to know the love of Christ in your life. Until next time, bye. You can reach out to us on Facebook or Instagram. We would love to hear from you. And be sure to click like and share this episode with family and friends. In doing so, you're sharing the love of Christ.